How can we cost effectively and efficiently reduce the possibility of harmful algal blooms taking place further into the future? Well, that's the question to which we're going to explore and answer in today's episode of Climate Mundial's Energy and Climate Weekly. So let's get right into it. In a recent video, I looked at the causes of harmful algal blooms, and in doing so, considered the outputs of a number of scholarly research papers on the topic, not just in any specific location, but very much globally, because harmful algal blooms are actually occurring in many locations around the world. We looked at the specific current case study of the harmful algal bloom that's affecting the coastal waters around the state of South Australia. But what I would like to do today is put some thoughts forward as to potential solutions to the causes of algal blooms. And in particular, we're talking here about nutrient runoff from various land use practices into fresh waterways, which is later discharged into ocean waterways. If we all agree that one of the main challenges associated with causing harmful algal blooms is in fact that nutrients used in various land use practices are finding their way into fresh waterways and then later on being discharged into oceans, which then cause disruption and death to sea life and also seagrass, then one of the clearest and most obvious ways that this could be dealt with is to actually prohibit those practices that are causing the nutrients to actually flow into the freshwater ways. But I will focus on a different solution today because, in principle, regulatory solutions like that are going to be very politically difficult to introduce, and they will also likely lead to a lot of socio-economic impacts. And so therefore, whilst those solutions are legitimate and potentially technically feasible fixes to the problem, I'm going to focus more on a market-based approach to solving this type of problem. As identified in the previous video, resolving harmful algal blooms could actually lead to climate mitigation benefits. That is, there are scientific papers that identify harmful algal blooms as causing decomposition of biological material underneath the water, which actually then finds its way into the atmosphere as methane gas. And methane gas is a greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide, though it is orders of magnitude more potent, I think in the order of 23 to 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So in addition to if one was able to reduce nutrient runoff into freshwater ways, and that led to the reduction of any potential causation of harmful algal blooms, the co-benefit of doing so would actually lead to less anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. And so that is really important for devising a nature-based solution that could deal with this problem. One of the potential solutions that was shared in the previous video was actually the planting of trees in the adjacent areas to the banks of fresh waterways, which would actually have the effect of lowering the water table, would mean that there'd be less runoff of water that may have these nutrients in them into the freshwater rivers, and this could also contribute to a reduction in salinity. So that's a really important point, because planting trees, whether they be, in the case of the Australian context, would be mallee plantings or other native species, would actually lead also to sequestration of carbon dioxide. So every time there is a growth of a tree, the photosynthesis sequesters carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And in effect, this represents a mitigation action which reduces greenhouse gas emissions through taking some emissions out of the atmosphere. So in effect, the technical solutions that are being contemplated, that is the planting of trees on the banks of rivers to try and lower the water table and actually reduce the amount of runoff into the freshwater ways, as well as the co-benefit of reducing methane emissions that would occur from the freshwater into the atmosphere as a result of anaerobic decomposition, that occurs underneath the water. These two co-benefits of reduced methane emissions as well as sequestered carbon dioxide are potentially verifiable and measurable, and that makes them potentially suitable for use as a carbon market project. That is, a project that produces emission reductions that can be certified and then sold to entities who have a compliance obligation in some type of carbon market. Now, in the case of Australia, there is an overall industrial emissions trading system called the Safeguard Mechanism, which requires that entities in Australia, and around 220 or so of the largest emitters, actually reduce emissions. And one of the ways that they can comply with that, the safeguard mechanism, is to actually purchase Australian carbon credit units or offset credits, which are produced in the land use sector and some other sectors as well. And those certificates can then be used to offset the obligations that these entities have under the safeguard mechanism. And that would be a really interesting one for Australia. But there are also many other carbon markets around the world. And so the potential to use the emission reduction and the sequestration climate benefits of the solutions that are put into place to reduce runoff of nutrients into fresh waterways could potentially represent a great opportunity to incentivize that type of measure through the carbon markets. I would not want to underestimate the technical challenges associated with measuring and verifying that emission reductions have actually taken place in these kinds of projects. In terms of the sequestration of carbon dioxide that would take place if trees are planted, that's probably a little bit more certain and has been certainly implemented globally in various carbon market certification systems globally. However, the emissions that could be prevented from fresh waterways that result from anaerobic decomposition of biological material is orders of magnitude more complex. And also, as mentioned in the previous video, there is some of that contribution to emissions coming from natural means, and then there's also a component that would come through the anthropogenic causes or the human-induced causes of the arrival of nutrients into the waterway. So that would be an extremely difficult one from a technical perspective to do. Having said that, there ought to be enough scientific research to assist with coming up with some conservative methodologies for doing so. Now, this is a potentially very interesting option for the broader market, because this provides an incentive then for entities to go about planning and implementing the sorts of projects that could lead to less runoff of nutrients into fresh waterways, because there is a market-based opportunity to actually certify the emission reductions and then sell those emission reductions into compliance and even potentially voluntary carbon markets, whether that be in Australia or globally in other markets. And the power of this market-based incentive is also underscored by the fact that in the broader market, there is a significant emphasis being placed by corporations on finding nature-based solutions. Now, nature-based solutions refer to where ecosystem services are preserved. That is, where businesses take different goods and products from nature and don't necessarily replenish those goods and services from nature, but actually nature will replenish those itself. So this is a really important area, and with corporations being so focused now on ecosystem services and nature-based solutions, this seems like a very good time to allow this type of market-based approach to occur, to try and find solutions upstream that deal with the root causes of the nutrients that give rise to harmful algal blooms. So I do acknowledge this is a reasonably challenging technical context and a solution. So none of what I'm suggesting here should be taken as being without problems and without challenges that need to be overcome. However, I think it's important to consider the benefits of this kind of approach as an alternative to a regulatory approach, which would actually look to legislate and restrict the use of certain products by users of land that also use waterways upstream, which, as I mentioned earlier in the video, could contribute to fairly significant socio-economic impacts, would likely encounter a number of political blockage points along the way. So if one considers the potential opportunity to work on resolving the technical matters that might otherwise affect the measurement and verification of these solutions, and also perhaps deal with the permanence related to tree growth, then there is a potential market opportunity which would create an incentive for users of land upstream in these freshwater ways to try and find solutions that would actually address the root causes of harmful algal blooms. And so there we have it. That's my friendly suggestion for how it would be most efficient and probably the best way to solve the root causes of harmful algal blooms by creating a market-based incentive that would allow firms and users of land to cooperate together to try and find ways to deal with the nutrient runoff into freshwater ways, at the same time producing climate benefits, being sequestration of greenhouse gases as well as reduction of methane emissions, and doing so in a way where profits can be generated, attractive investment returns can also be generated, as opposed to using regulatory solutions that prohibit certain activities from taking place, which I acknowledge could potentially work, but would have serious socio-economic impacts as well as political challenges to get there. But I'd like to know, what do you think about this? Is it appropriate to use market-based solutions for something as ecologically sensitive as a harmful algal bloom? Are these solutions the kinds that are going to work anyway, or is there something else that you can foresee? Please let me know what you think by making a comment below. Please like the video, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with your family, friends, and colleagues. On that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next episode of Climate Mundial's Energy and Climate Weekly. Bye for now.